I'd like to welcome you back to Affinity 10. My name is Nick with TDG. In this episode, we're going to explore packaging, what packaging is, and how packaging can be beneficial to both us as a designer as well as to the client. That brings me to our Toby tip, and Toby would like to remind us that peanut butter treats are delicious. Seriously, Toby, you have one task and you're bringing jokes? Toby's real tip is packaging ensures that any linked asset we placed within our document, as well as any fonts that we use in our design, are then brought together and stored within one centralized packaged folder. Let's talk about how this can be beneficial to us as a designer. In a perfect world, as we're working on a project for a client, we will get a new asset, download it, modify it as needed, and then save it to our project folder before placing it in our document. But as we know, this isn't a perfect world, and we sometimes feel rushed. We'll download it to our downloads folder or to our desktop and place it in our project before actually properly filing that file away. Where that can come back to get us at is in a month or two or in a year when we come back to open this design again to make changes, we'll then get the missing link there. And if you're not familiar with how links work in Publisher, when you're placing any type of linked element, such as a photograph, inside your document, it's then using a file path to reference where that file is. So if it was referencing a file in the downloads folder, but you have since downloaded that and then deleted it, it can no longer find that asset. So you're going to get the missing link there. Now you can always go back through your emails and panic and try to find that email again that has that asset. Or you can go back to the client and ask them to resend it to you, which of course you'd rather not do. That's not a good look. So one way we can safeguard ourselves as designers is by packaging the document. So what I currently have opened up is a 272-page publication as referenced down here in the lower left-hand corner. And as I scroll through this document, you'll notice there are several graphical elements, lots of typography used, lots of ads, and PDFs that are all linked in this document. As you may recall, when I set up new documents myself, I always prefer to set my new files up as linked. And what that ensures is that when you're working with big projects, particularly multi-page files or any file really that has several graphical elements or large file assets, it'll just help that process speed up a little bit quicker and it won't bog down your machine very much. Because if you use embedded, that's going to make your Affinity file size much, much larger, which then can slow down your process and slow down your computer more. So I always prefer to use the linked method when creating my documents. So to package our design, once we have our design fully approved and it's ready to go, we can then go up to our file menu. And you've probably noticed this save as package, but wasn't quite sure what it does. So let's see what this will do when we click on it. And it may take a second or two for Publisher to go through and process your request, so be patient. Now we're going to get a dialog box that pops up that says this document contains one or more restricted fonts. Please ensure that you comply with any applicable copyright laws and licensing agreements if you intend to redistribute the package. Now that means if you're working with, for example, another designer, you would have to send them the packaged file so they have all the assets you've been working with, but that would also mean that they have to have the licensing for the fonts, or your client would have to have the licensing for the fonts. So that's something to be very mindful of when you're working on projects for clients, is that if you are using licensed fonts that you had to pay for, or you have to have a subscription for, you want to make sure that you get that approval from the client, since you would most likely be billing that money to them, and they would also have to purchase the fonts themselves. So let's go ahead and close out of this and proceed with the packaging process. And once again, this may take a couple of seconds before the dialog box will pop open. And now we get the package document dialog box. So here we have our summary. It's showing that it's a document. It's showing we have 16 total fonts and 5 restricted fonts. And those 5 restricted fonts, well, I didn't actually use them inside this publication. I just placed some typography on random pages to show you what would happen if you did use, for example, fonts from a subscription service. As we go down to the images, you'll see we have 755 total images. Linked are 754. So I have 754 linked assets in this project, a total of 755. And what that could mean is maybe I had an image or a vector graphic that I took from Affinity Designer and just copied and pasted it into this document. So while it's not actually a linked file, that would be an embedded asset. If you have a missing image, it would show up here, and that would mean, for example, you had an asset that you had deleted before trying the package. It would then show up as missing, that it can't locate that path to that file. If you have a modified asset, that means, for example, you had placed a photograph in your file, and then maybe you realized that it had to be converted to CMYK. You had forgotten to do that. So therefore you open it up in Affinity Photo, you change it from RGB to CMYK and then save that file. Publisher is going to pick up on the fact that that file has been modified up to that point, and you have to update that modified file. You also have the options to include fonts and include images. These are checkmarked by default because that is, after all, the main purpose of creating a packaged file, is that you have all of your assets gathered in one location. Going down to our Fonts tab, this is where we'll see the restricted fonts that I placed within this document to show you what would happen when you used fonts that are restricted or licensed. And any font that is not restricted will show the green check mark. And that's not to say these links, or these fonts rather, will not be packaged. It just means that for them to actually be used by either your clients or the other designer you're working with, they would have to have the licensing or purchase the fonts or have the same subscription service to get access to the fonts. So you just kind of want to go over this and make sure everything is accounted for. Going down to our images, we have all these green check marks by our images. If we had anything that was red with a red X or yellow with a yellow exclamation mark, that would mean something has been modified or a link is missing. So we scroll through here, we see everything is check marked and everything is accounted for, which is exactly what we want. So now I'm going to say OK. Once we say OK, it's going to ask you where you want to create this packaged file at. Now, programs like Adobe InDesign will create the package for your file for you. However, Publisher would like you to create your own folder. So I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to name it accordingly. And once it's named, I can open up that folder. And now we can go ahead and click on Package. Now, depending on the speed of your computer, this could take a little while. Also, depending on the size of the document, this could take a little while. So we'll go ahead and click on Package. And we'll let Publisher run through its process here. So here it's going through and creating our package. And keep in mind this may be faster or slower depending on how fast your computer is. We'll let it continue through the process. And now our package is complete. So once that dialog box disappears, you'll see up here our file type is now changed to AF package, which is the file extension for a packaged publisher file. If I go ahead and close out of this, I am going to open up our folder where we put our package at, and now we'll see our package folder here. I can double click on that, and this is all of the assets that we had in our document, fonts and images brought together in one package folder, which is what we want. So I go into the fonts. You'll notice all of the fonts are here. Now these fonts here are the restricted ones, which is why you're not seeing the file names show up. So if the user has the subscription or the licensing, then these font names would actually show properly. We go into our images folder, and here are all of the different assets we used in the project, 754 total of them. So we'll go back to our root level, and now we can go ahead and package this off. So if you were sending this to your clients, because you had an agreement to send them the package file, there are services out there that can send large files. You can also share perhaps a shared folder on a creative service with them. But you can also right-click and then compress to a zip file. Or on Mac, I believe it's send to zip, to create a zip file and then send that off to your client or share with them. Can now double click on this, make sure everything opens up okay. Once again, you're going to be greeted with the summary of our package. And this is showing the information here. We go ahead and click on OK. And it will open up our file, and we can go through and kind of spot check everything. So as it continues to go through, I'll just kind of scroll down here a little bit, click on another page, and there's our assets. And I know I'll probably get the question of, did I really create a 272-page document as separate pages? No, this was originally set up as facing pages, but because I had to have bleed on all 4 sides of the pages, I then took the pages and separated them off to export it as pages to send to the printer. I can go up to File. You'll notice that Save is grayed out. That's because Affinity is protecting us from overwriting our package file. So you just have to do Save As, and then change the file name, just put maybe like a version number on the end of it. Click Save. It's going to go through and save the document. This, once again, can take a little bit of time depending on the speed of your computer. And then once this document is saved, you can then go through and start modifying and changing it for a future edition of the publication or for any other project purposes you have coming up for that customer or that client. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this session of Affinity 10. Please subscribe and leave a comment for the algorithm. It would be greatly appreciated. Have a good day, and I'll see you in the next session.